right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the newest edition of the Boxing Podcast. It is with great pleasure that I introduce my new co-host. A little bit more on the casual side. He's here to bring in that younger perspective. Also someone who's a little more versed in other combat sports than I am, like UFC, and just other sports in general, I would say. This is my little brother, Angelo Rodriguez, and he's going to be coming in. So, Ange, why don't you tell us kind of how you got into boxing?
Yeah, started maybe a few years ago. Hearing you and Dad talk about it growing up, so I was always kind of around it, but I was more the, like you said, baseball guy. But as I started to listen to you and Dad speak on it more, I started taking interest into it, and like you said, a little bit more casual, but trying to get to that hardcore fan. So I'm excited for this podcast for sure.
And would you say there's like a specific boxer that kind of tipped you over into the boxing world, or just kind of boxing in general interested you?
Not a boxer specifically.
You came around when To This Date was trending, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, seeing what Wilder was doing, Canelo was performing at a high level. So seeing that, and then kind of a few years ago when the influencer boxing stuff happened, I can't lie and say it didn't interest me a little bit as well. But now that I've watched boxing a little bit more, I know what real boxing really is. So
yeah, and we'll kind of talk about how the influencers got you and basically a lot of Gen Z into boxing a little bit later in the show. But we'll just jump into our first big topic. Angelo and I were at the Benavidez plant pay-per-view, Showtime pay-per-view over last weekend. Great time, great show. We're going to jump into just basically what we thought of the show. Let's start with the card, the main card. We saw the opening contest between Ramos and Cody Crawley. We got to hear in the weigh-in about Cody's journey, really inspirational stuff. We both went in decked out in our Mexico stuff. We are two Mexican-American kids, so we always got to represent. But Cody's story really spoke to me. I was going for him during the fight. I don't know about you. When that kind of fight started, did you have a side that you were kind of going for? Were you kind of just up in the air? Or?
Not necessarily a side, but when you hear someone like Crowley speak on the journey he's taken, and you hear about someone who could have easily laid down and given up, it's always hard not to say, I hope that guy loses. It's tough to say that, but like you said, Ramos was Mexican guy, so. But no, I enjoyed it, and it was a great fight too. It was a great fight. Crowley looked impressive.
Yeah, it was a close fight in the beginning where you kind of saw Ramos get a little bit of success with his power and land a couple shots, but Crowley, man, was just, he would overwhelm him with that pressure, get him against the ropes, and just win rounds that way. At the end, we come to a split decision, if I remember correctly, with Crowley taking home the W, which I thought was the right call. I actually thought it should have been a unanimous decision. I kind of had Crowley winning that fight pretty clearly. Like I said, the first couple rounds, I kind of had a little closer, but towards the end of the fight, it was kind of obvious to me that pressure was just too much for Ramos. Did you kind of see the same thing? Did you see something else in that fight? Or?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the same way. I really wish we would have seen Ramos stay off the ropes in that fight. It seemed like when they were going toe-to-toe in the middle of the ring, Ramos was getting the better of Crowley. But you got to give it to Crowley. I mean, we saw him after the fight. We were able to take a picture of him. He looked beat up.
That was sick.
He looked beat up. So
the way he came out in the crowd, too, afterwards.
Absolutely. So you got to give it to Crowley. I mean, the pressure looked like a lot for Ramos. Like you said, at first, didn't look like maybe he was going to be able to stay in that fight and win. But, man, towards the end, he did not run out of gas, kept Ramos under pressure, and he looked good. You got to admit.
He mentioned in the presser leading up that you need to throw 150 to 200 punches to keep rhythm with him, and we kind of scoffed at that a little, coming from those wonderful Estrada Chocolatito fights, which really did have 150 to 200 punches thrown per round. We were kind of like, I don't know if these heavier guys, these kind of bigger guys can do that, but I was surprised too that Cody didn't get gassed out at the end there and really kept up that pace for the whole fight. Really impressive stuff. I hope to see more from Crawley.
Absolutely.
This was at 140 or 135 around that division. So I'm hoping that we got a lot of big names around there. He doesn't have to go and take on a champion right now, the top guy in the division. But it'd be nice to see him throw his hat in the ring with some of these guys, like maybe a Cambosis or something. Maybe not quite the top guys, but definitely a step up in competition. Moving on, we had the second and most controversial fight of the night. that saw Velasquez take on Chris Colbert in a match where Colbert was coming off of a loss and moving up in weight. Colbert coming off of a loss to Hector Garcia, but still had a lot of confidence, especially opening in that fight. Even closing that fight, which we'll get to in just a second. He had a lot of confidence, but the story of the fight was basically you saw the first round droppage of Chris Colbert. He went down in the first round. Obviously, Velasquez a lot bigger and really ready for this fight. I thought it even could have been stopped in the first round when I saw that knockdown. It was really vicious. I mean, obviously Colbert would go on to fight the entire fight. He wasn't hurt enough to stop it, but it looked bad, is what I'm saying when I first saw that. But the fight would go on. Colbert would win a couple rounds, but I don't think nearly enough to give him the win. Maybe 3 to 4 rounds for Colbert in a 10-round fight. I don't know if you had it any differently, and that's being generous, honestly, and giving him those close rounds.
Yeah, I mean, when that fight opened up and you saw Colbert go down on a big punch, I mean, you got to give it to Colbert as well. The fact that he got up from that punch, because when I saw it, and then you see the replays, the way his head just spinned, I mean, that was beautiful. But, you know, the only problem I have is it seemed like Colbert really came alive towards the end of that fight, and I think that's maybe what the judges were looking at. But I'm still on your side. I thought it was a robbery, and I thought it was a pretty clear robbery that I think most people would agree with. But, again, I think Colbert was able to turn it on a little bit and pressure a little bit towards the end, and maybe I guess that's what the judges saw. Not what I saw personally, but hey, man, that's, you know, you gotta keep that pressure throughout the fight, and Colbert was able to stop the pressure and give some of his own. So.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. In the later rounds, Colbert kind of turned it on and had a lot more success. It seemed maybe Velasquez might have been getting gassed out, wasn't willing to keep trading and keeping up that pressure, but yeah, we go to the decisions at the end of that 10-rounder, and the judges score it actually unanimously, I think 95-94, so just by one round and keep in mind, the first round is a 10-8 round for that knockdown. So Colbert had to really win a couple rounds to make up that difference in their scorecard, but the place just erupted, man.
Oh.
I mean, that place was already a Benavidez Mexican-American crowd. Like, they were going to be all pro-Mexicans the entire night. But
from the weigh-in.
Yeah, from the weigh-in even. And Velasquez got some noise in the weigh-in too. Colbert came in with the Mexican flag too to kind of rile up the crowd and everything. And when that scorecard was read, I think everybody was about, oh, that's kind of close, but good thing Velasquez got the win, right? And then you hear that Colbert won, and that place, like I said, just erupted, man. And you know, you can't really go off the crowd noise, but then you hear guys like Dan Raphael, who does his podcast, and pretty much everyone agreeing that this was a robbery. And keeping on that with Dan, who I respect a lot, his opinion, he also gave us the best look into our co-main event, which was Jesus Ramos versus why can't I remember their names now? I'm spacing, but it was the kid from Canada.
Spencer's last name.
Spencer is the kid from Canada who made a lot of noise on Fox Sports, getting a lot of the spotlight there. So Spencer was kind of the more golden child coming into this. I mean, they're both kind of up-and-comers, both coming off of losses, I believe, and just really trying to get back into it. But Dan mentioned that he had seen Ramos against a lot more meaningful opponents than Spencer, which made me lean towards thinking that Ramos was probably going to win. Dan usually knows what he's talking about, so I always trust those kind of picks. And we kind of saw that, you know, Jesus kind of outclassed Spencer and got the stoppage. Really messed him up, basically. It was really, like I said, outclassed. I don't know if I don't really have anything to add to that. It was pretty obvious that it was, on paper, a great matchup, but when Jesus got going, it was all his. You got anything to add to that?
No, I mean, same as you. It seemed like, you know, Ramos had the opposite plan of his brother. Hey, let's get this guy on the ropes, and let's do that to this guy. And you know, you hate to see a fighter that's undefeated go down like that, the way Spencer did, but also props to his corner for knowing, hey, it's time that we step in here, because a lot of corners, you know, especially an undefeated guy, will let that fight continue. So kudos to the corner. But yeah, I mean, Ramos just looked good, and like I said, he did the opposite of his brother that night, and it was beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and that's another important thing. I mean, these guys are not gonna let themselves go down if they can stay up, and so it's important for the corner or referee to jump in and stop these fights sometimes for them. And I think the corner did great, obviously recognizing that their guy was just outclassed. He wasn't really going to come back in. A lot of people might say, there's always a puncher's chance, but let's be real. In boxing, there's no need to take head trauma if you don't need to. But that kind of brings us up to what I wanted to get at. Before we go into our main event and everything that happened with Benavidez and Plant, I wanted to bring up just how the event did, because when we were sitting there, the atmosphere was awesome. You had a lot of noise, a lot of people excited, not just for the main event, but like I said, the co-main and the undercard, we talked about getting a lot of noise.
Insane. And I'll tell you, sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. I was at for those who may watch a little bit of UFC, the Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards fight, where Leon Edwards getting outclassed and absolutely dominated a head kick. And I'll tell you right now that Benavidez Plant atmosphere just had me, for some reason, way more fired up. And it was awesome to experience.
That's cool. That's not a small fight either, Usman and Edwards.
No, not at all.
But kind of going off that, what our dad, because we went with our dad, and he said something right, I think near the main event, or once the arena was kind of filled in and there was a lot of noise going on, and Dad turns to us and he says, and they say boxing's dead. Do you remember that? And me coming from, I'm just a generation before you, either the end of the millennials or the very beginning of Gen Z. So not a huge age difference, but I remember when I got into boxing kind of during the build up to Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, even before they even agreed, but people wanted them to fight. It did feel like boxing was kind of dead in the water. The heavyweight division had a stranglehold by the Klitschko's. Seemed like nobody wanted to fight each other. Canelo was there, but had just gotten that loss to Mayweather, was kind of building his name again. And people were really criticizing him on the Golovkin stuff. We didn't have the lightweight guys either. So it was really in a bad spot. And to see how good Benavidez and Plant did just in terms of that atmosphere was really cool. But then that got me thinking, and the reporters like Keith Idek and Mike Coppinger, those guys have been saying that Benavidez Plant did a $3 million gate. So we were talking about this before the podcast, that a similar UFC fight did around a 2-point-something million gate. So a really healthy gate for Benavidez Plant. And take that with a grain of salt. These are guys who nobody really has the numbers in boxing, whether it be pay-per-view buys, gate money, purses, all that stuff. Usually take it with a grain of salt. That's probably closer to an estimation of what it was, but for that being around $3 million is really good, considering both of these guys are not household names. I mean, the hardcore boxing fan, even a casual boxing fan, probably has a pretty good idea of who both these guys are, but they're not a Canelo. They're not a Tyson Fury. They're not even an Anthony Joshua or Wilder, So, really cool gate to see, and just goes to show that if you make a meaningful fight with a meaningful card, people will show up. But let's get into the main event. The story of the night. Let's start kind of round by round. Was early success. I would say you could find a way to give Plant the first 3 rounds. I would say really in control of the fight, kind of walking around the ring. Benavidez wasn't really turning it on yet. I felt like he was kind of feeling him out to see how much power Plant actually had, especially after that Durrell knockout. But we saw a lot of success those first 3 rounds for Plant. Really nothing special out of Benavidez in those first 3 rounds. I don't know if you saw anything that I didn't.
No, just kind of same as you. I thought, I mean, going into the fight, you got 2 guys who did a hell of a job of hyping up this fight, but that first round, people are excited and they're ready, but you got to show the other guy respect. I mean, these 2 guys have some brutal knockouts, so you knew it wasn't gonna go to fireworks within those first 2 or 3 rounds, but it picked up. It picked up if you were watching.
Oh yeah, so that takes us into maybe round 4, 5, and 6. What did you see kind of there, those middle rounds of the fight?
I saw kind of a turnaround for Benavidez. I think it was the 4th round that he said in the post-fight presser that he said he had landed a body shot and heard Plant kind of give and I guess he said to Plant, I heard that, and that's where Benavidez felt that he started to turn around the fight. That's kind of where I'm at too. Maybe more the 5th round. I can't remember if he said it was the 4th or 5th round that he landed that shot, but he said that in the post-fight presser. That's kind of what I saw. And then from there, it was. I mean, Benavidez just looked fantastic. He showed defense, which we're not used to really, but it looked good.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually wanted to touch on that. Those middle rounds were a lot closer than those clear rounds for Caleb Plant, and we'll talk about the later rounds, which were kind of more for Benavidez. But I think we saw the best of Benavidez in those middle rounds. He was landing a couple shots, like you mentioned, that big body shot. There were a couple times where Plant was rocked early on. Plant wasn't gassed yet or hurt. We hadn't seen the headbutt, which we'll get into in just a second. But Because of that, Plant was willing to still trade a little and press forward a little, even when he was hit. So we did see a little bit of head movement from Benavidez, which we're not really used to. We saw that high guard, which is his standard defense, but it really came on in this fight and protected him from a vicious knockout, like the kind of that Durrell faced. Even when Plant kind of used his signature move, which is to go to that body and get you to drop that high guard, he actually used it against Canelo with a little more success. Benavidez was firm on keeping his hands up and making sure that his chin wasn't going to take an unnecessary hit, which was cool. But like I said, it was still kind of closer in those middle rounds, and then you started hearing the trash talking. I know that the referee kind of got involved too and told them that, hey, you guys got to calm it down with that. But then we started to see Benavidez really turn on in those last 6 rounds. I think all the judges gave at least the last 5 rounds to Benavidez, if not all 6. But tell me what you kind of saw from Benavidez turning it on later in that fight.
And you mentioned the ref talking to them about the trash talk. I wish what the ref would have done was talk to Plant about clinching, because I think if you get a warning out there or just something to let Plant know, hey, you got to stop clinching. I do think Benavidez comes out with a stoppage. That may be heavy, but I mean, every time it seemed like Benavidez would land something clean, Plant was immediately to the clinch, which is smart, especially when the ref's not saying anything. I just feel the ref was letting Benavidez know early in the fight what he was doing wrong and kind of was allowing Plant to get away maybe with some of that clinching. However, regardless, there was a headbutt, which at first it looked like they took a look at it when he went back to the corner. Mm-hmm. Wasn't enough to stop it. But then, I mean, Benavidez just absolutely showed what he's about. He just turned it on. Absolutely.
And kind of to jump on that, the discourse around the fight afterwards was a lot of criticism to the referee for not calling out those clinches. It's actually started a complete discourse in boxing, which maybe we'll get into in another episode, especially with that Haney-Loma fight coming. I imagine we'll see a lot of clinching there. But whether or not clinching is legal in a fight, and the official rule book is intentional clinching is actually illegal in boxing. Sometimes people wrap up and it happens, but I do agree that I think the referee should have called out a little bit more of the clinching. The only thing I'll say to that, with people saying Benavidez would have gotten the stoppage, is that without that headbutt, I don't think Benavidez would have been as successful in the late rounds. I think Caleb Plant might have been a little more confident to turn around without the blood. He was bleeding a lot. That blood was getting into his eye, all over his face. The corner had to look at it. The doctor had to look at it. So I'll just add that counterpoint that things happen in fights, and it sucks. But I do think that there's two stories of the fight. That cut helped Benavidez a little bit, and the ref helped Plant a lot. But I agree. I think we could have seen a late game stoppage from Benavidez had there been a little less clinching, especially with that cut. That's very dangerous for Caleb Plant. If he was not able to see out of one of his eyes. But clear victory for Benavidez. I would say that there's no doubt that he was the better man than Caleb Plant in that fight. The interesting thing for me coming out of this fight, and a lot of discourse for Mexican and Mexican-American fans, is obviously the biggest fight that can be made in boxing right now. That's not a heavyweight fight, which is David Benavidez and Canelo Alvarez. Moving into this fight, Canelo Alvarez did get the stoppage in the 11th round against Caleb Plant. Some people saying that if Caleb Plant had clinched like he did against Benavidez, it would have gone the distance with Canelo. I think Canelo is just a little bit of a better boxer and is able to find his punches a little better and land those far more accurately. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Benavidez's performance means going into a potential matchup against Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's a better fight for Canelo. I think, especially because if Benavidez loses that fight, Benavidez could go on to still be a great champion. He's young. And I don't think that it's an easy fight for Canelo. I think it's, besides the Bivol fight, of course, which, we can get into that if you want to get into that, but Benavidez is the hardest fight for Canelo. I think Benavidez would give him a challenge. I think Benavidez would train well for that fight, and I liked the way Benavidez called him out humbly in both the in-ring interview and the post-fight. But I think that Canelo pulls out the win, but it's closer than I think people will give it credit for, kind of like they did with Bivol. I say that as a casual fan, of course, but Benavidez versus Plant, I don't think was as close as the Canelo fight. Canelo, I mean, if you go back and look at the scorecards, Canelo was down after the 6th or 7th round in every single scorecard. It was by a round or two, but I would love to see that fight. And that fight would do just, those guys would get paid and set their kids for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. That's definitely an Allegiant Stadium fight. Or if you just want to overprice the tickets, you could do it at T-Mobile Arena. But either way, that fight brings in a ton of money. I'm interested that you say that the Canelo fight, or that Benavidez is the second hardest fight for Canelo out there. I believe Canelo picks up early rounds against Benavidez in a much more meaningful way than Plant. I think he would pick up at least the first 5 rounds and maybe turn it on in round 11 and 12 to finish strong or something. But I do think Canelo wins a clear decision in that fight. I just think that Benavidez would get a little outclassed. Not to say that Benavidez could never beat Canelo. I just think now is the wrong time for him. I actually would prefer if Canelo fought Bivol first, because I think at 168, Bivol's very drained. I think Canelo has a good chance against him. But I am also a little biased. Canelo is my number 1 pound-for-pound guy right now. I believe that he went up, dared to be great, and lost a close decision. Not super close, but I had it 4-8 for Bivol, winning that fight. So I think Canelo could turn on and show us one last great hoorah at the end of his career, kind of. And I think that that's dangerous for Benavidez. I would prefer if Benavidez maybe picked up another win against a Charlo or a Munguia or Berlanga, and then moved into the Canelo fight. Even maybe a Golovkin, which that's not a very hard fight for Benavidez. In fact, I would prefer Munguia taking on Golovkin, but that's for another day. Basically, though, I want to kind of wrap it up and bring in that there's a lot of criticism at Canelo, especially from Mexican fans, saying that he's ducking Benavidez. And I kind of want to hear your take on that.
No, and that's where I'm with you on that. I'll admit that I'm a little bit biased. Canelo's also my number 1. Same reasoning as you. I hate the Canelo criticism. I understand that maybe people look at the Plant, the Billy Joe Saunders, the Yildirim fight that he took, right, which was a mandatory.
Yep.
Those guys weren't necessarily
Callum Smith, who were all world champions at the time besides Yildirim.
World champions, and people are saying that, well, it wasn't the best competition. Well, it was at the time for Canelo. He went out and he did it, and
that was right after the second Golovkin fight.
Exactly. So Canelo is not ducking anybody. If there's someone Canelo should be ducking right now, in my opinion, it's Bivol, especially at 175. If I'm Canelo, that's the fight I'm ducking. But he's not. He's saying, hey, let's do this thing. Like, he talked to reporters finally for the first time. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, and he said, no, I want Bivol. If Bivol doesn't happen, then I'll go Benavidez. The thing is, Canelo's the money man, so he's going to get called out. But the Bivol fight is, if that's what he goes for, I don't agree. I think he should go for the Benavidez fight next. But if he goes for the Bivol fight, he's not ducking anyone.
Absolutely, and I kind of agree with that. And Eddie Hearn made a great point where he brought up that Bivol beat Canelo already. Bivol is the most dangerous fighter out there for Canelo. And the fact that Canelo is so eager to get back in the ring with him, I think proves that Canelo is not afraid to fight anybody. And I just kind of wanted to put a pin on that because I do get tired of people calling Canelo a duck, calling Canelo this or that. The bottom line is, if David Benavidez, and I hate to throw this because the kid's matured, he's great. I have all the faith that Benavidez is going to be a great Mexican champion. I'm a huge Benavidez fan. That being said, had Benavidez not tested positive for cocaine or missed weight, he would have already fought Canelo Alvarez. But that's kind of the last thing I want to say there. And now we're going to move into a little bit more your domain. Recently, we saw Jake Paul step up and fight a real boxer, air quotes under real, Tommy Fury. And actually a little bit one-sided, but I don't think that Jake Paul, if he is initiating this rematch with Tommy Fury, I don't think it's impossible for him to come back and win. But I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on Jake Paul's performance against Tommy Fury, his resume, and what's next for him.
Yeah, I think Jake Paul could come back and win. He sits here and tells us that, well, it was 70% of me that night. Well, maybe, and maybe that was 70% versus 100%. I don't care. I do think he got outclassed. I think for the first time, Jake Paul looked bad. Just bad. I mean, Tommy Fury was better, and by no means does this mean Tommy Fury should be a top 5 guy at cruiserweight. And no, I'm not saying that. What Jake Paul needs to do is go take this KSI fight. You want a payday, you're going to get the payday. Go take it in London and sell out a huge arena there, because we've heard the UK fans are crazy. and go beat KSI. I think you beat KSI, but there's always that doubt there. Now Jake Paul has the loss, and maybe with that loss he thinks, well, if KSI takes me seriously, could he do that to me? I don't think so. We'll see. KSI's fighting Joe Fournier, who's again a quote-unquote real boxer, so we'll see how that looks. And then on the other side, if you're Tommy Fury, become the Jake Paul. Beat up these influencers. Make your money and beat them up. Don't go after a Bodu Jack. You're not going to win that fight. Jake Paul, you got your influencers and MMA fighters under your belt, and now you fought again, quote-unquote, real boxer, but go after the KSI fight. It's going to make you a lot of money. He has this PFL deal so I don't know if he's going to fight MMA, but go beat KSI and see if Nate Diaz will fight you after that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. My big question here is Jake Paul wanting to be a serious boxer or an influencer boxer? And if he's okay with not being taken seriously as a boxer, I would 100% agree with you. The best thing he could do is go fight KSI and Nate Diaz and maybe McGregor one day. My advice to Jake is if he wants to be a professional boxer, he already beat Anderson Silva viciously, and Anderson Silva beat a professional boxer in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. So if you want to regroup, prove that you can beat a boxer, I would say, Jake, throw some money at Chavez Jr. and get an easy knockout against the guy who can't box, and maybe come back and fight Tommy Fury with that win under your belt and take yourself seriously, because I don't think Tommy Fury is a great boxer. I think that Jake just hasn't had the experience that Tommy had, and Tommy got the better of him on that stage. But I think that if Jake kind of goes back and regroups and gets that experience, maybe brings in, you don't have to do your whole team, but I would like to see Jake Paul team up with another real boxing trainer with a good name and a good legacy, and see what they can do with him. And that's kind of how I would go. But be humble and come back against these fighters who are willing to take on influencers and already have losses against influencers. Well, not influencers, but Silva. And regroup and come back. I think if you want to be taken seriously, you still can. I mean, both of you are already somehow ranked by the WBC because Bodu Jack was on the undercard of your fight, and he's a champion, and they wanted to set that up, I'm assuming. If Jake Paul would have won, I'm assuming that's the direction they wanted to go in.
Which he loses that fight.
Absolutely.
He probably gets stopped in that fight.
And the credit I'll give is KSI's opponent, who I also think is actually worse than Tommy Fury as a boxer, but KSI's opponent is more fitting for him. Tommy Fury was fighting at weight divisions bigger than Jake Paul before he met Jake Paul. So I don't think there's as much shame. You got beat by a bigger fighter. This is the same as taking a step up in weight for Jake, I think, even though they were at a catch weight. So I think, you regroup and you kind of find yourself a little more, and you might still have success. But if you're about the money and you want the clout and you want the fame, absolutely. I think Angela's got this one right on the nail. Go fight KSI. You knock him out. KSI is not a boxer. You'll do better than him. I promise you, Jake Paul. Anything else you want to go on with the influencers before we move on?
No, not big. The last thing I would like to say as I went on that little Jake Paul rant, though, is respects to Jake Paul. As you said, the guy wasn't 40. He wasn't an MMA fighter. He wasn't an influencer. Tommy Fury was younger than him, was bigger than him, and he stepped in the ring with him. And more experience, and he has, he's got the Fury background. Furies are fighters.
Tommy Fury, that's something we forgot to mention. Tommy Fury has been boxing since he was 2 years old, and Jake Paul started when he was 20-something.
Yeah, so I mean, respect to Jake Paul, but if you want the money, go get the money. If you want the fights, go get the fights. They're both there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And now back to our real boxing. The biggest fight coming up is obviously, and there's a video already on the YouTube channel Cisco Sasquatch. Go check it out. For build up some hype to it, but we've got Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. Huge fights at the catch weight of 136 pounds with a rehydration clause. I really just want to hear your predictions for this upcoming fight and what you think about the build up and these special rules at this catch weight.
The first thing you have to open up with, I think, here is, respect. To Ryan and to Tank, respect to both of you. Even though I am going for someone and I do have a winner picked, respect to you guys, because there's so many fights in boxing, and I came, like you said, from the UFC thing where fights were just made because you just had one guy. I didn't realize that it's a problem in boxing, but you made the fight, you got it done. People are complaining about it's $85.99 or $84.99. okay, well, we complained about them not fighting each other. We can't complain about the price now that they're fighting each other. But no, it's respects to them. The rehydration thing, I don't know. You give a little bit more respect to Garcia because it sounds like he went more out of his way to make this fight and like he wanted the fight maybe more than Tank did. But I mean, again, just respects to both guys. Throw all that stuff away for now. The rehydration, the money, just give these guys the respect that they deserve. The build-up has been interesting, these press conferences. Maybe not as exciting as the Plant Benavidez press conferences, but interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, there was a line that... What did Tank say? You're punctual to him? And Tank's been showing up late to all the press conferences, and Ryan's been like, you're kind of a dick, bro, for doing that. I think they could have gotten a little more heated with each other at these pressers, but we'll see how it goes. We still got almost a month away.
However... Sorry to cut you off in terms of the press conferences. So speaking of the influencer boxing, I watched the Impulsive podcast, Logan Paul. Ryan said he's got nothing against Tank. Says he respects him. So maybe that's what it is. Respects him. He's excited to fight him. But I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to throw that in there.
No, yeah, and that's kind of interesting to me. The way I've kind of seen it is just to jump on my little tirade. The price point is ridiculous. Respect to these guys for sure. Respect especially to Ryan Garcia, who I've been very critical of in his past, especially with the falling out with Canelo and Eddie Reynoso. I considered Ryan a punk kid. He dropped out for mental health reasons, which respect for him. Good thing he sorted that out. But
I had to bring you back in.
In the boxing world, we harp on these tough guys. We want these guys to be our tough guys, the guys who win and don't show that weakness. But I had a lot of respect for Ryan Garcia and Danny Garcia, who we recently saw open up about his own mental health. Nothing but respect to those guys. So I've been very critical of Ryan Garcia in the past, and I cannot say enough great things about this kid for stepping up and fighting Tank Davis. I think more so than Benavidez, Ryan Garcia is the future face of Mexican boxing, the next kind of golden boy, especially because I believe he picks up the win over Tank Davis. But we'll get into our own Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia whole podcast once it gets a little closer. But just to go on and bring us into the actual topic of this discussion is recently after the pressers, it was revealed that Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia are fighting at that 136 catch weight, and also Ryan Garcia has a rehydration clause. The most, I guess the biggest mainstream example of this I can think of is when Mayweather fought Canelo, there was also a rehydration clause in that contract, draining Canelo, making him look a little smaller than he was. And I have the same fear for Ryan that he may be a little drained. But honestly, I don't think that matters all that much because I think we're still close enough to Ryan fighting at 135 that 136 is going to be hard for him, sure, but I think he'll make it, and I think his power will still be there. Let me hear your thoughts on the rehydration stuff.
Yeah, the rehydration stuff is interesting to me. Something I haven't dealt much with of hearing it. Like you said, the most famous one that I can think of off the top of my head is Canelo Mayweather, and the rehydration, it's 10 pounds, right? It's 10 pounds, and I don't know what Ryan walks around at. I don't know what he walks around at, but I mean...
It's more than 146.
So that's tough for Ryan, but... Ryan said, hey, let's do it. And like you said, respects to Ryan. I think there's also a rematch clause only for Tank. So it sounds, to me, and I hate to say it like this, don't come at me for saying it like this, but it sounds like Tank's preparing for a loss almost, is what it feels like.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too, or at least an excuse if he does lose. Whether that be Ryan was way bigger than me, or... I just wasn't 100%, which is the Jake Paul excuse. Or maybe he even comes out and says that his ring gear was way too heavy. I don't know. But it does seem like Garcia or Davis may be preparing for worst case scenario. And like I said, because Ryan doesn't have those opportunities, I want to give him a lot of props. But props to Davis too, because Davis has a lot going on in his personal life, but also he's gotten a lot of criticism for avoiding a lot of these fighters. And Ryan is a huge name for him and a dangerous fight for him. So props to both those guys. Lastly, we'll definitely get more into how we see the fight going, the round by round kind of analysis and all that stuff. But just real quick, I want to hear, how do you think this fight ends?
So we've been going back and forth on this one, and for most of the time, we've had the same the same kind of idea. I want to switch over, and I want to say that Tank Davis wins this fight. I'm going to say Tank Davis wins this fight late stoppage. I think he's gonna get something, get Ryan with something that Ryan's not gonna get up from, and that's a big switch for me. But I think Tank Davis is gonna dig in and he's gonna catch him middle of round 11.
Wow. Okay.
Middle of round 11.
Okay, I'm gonna say Ryan wins by decision.
Okay.
And the decision I'm giving him is I think that Tank will find him a little bit in those rounds, but I think inevitably Ryan will land a little more, pick up early rounds especially, and he'll just bank enough that once it gets to that decision at the end of the night, it's gonna go to Ryan.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm excited though. I'm excited.
All right. Well, moving on. He mentioned, and a bunch of people are starting to report that he's in talks with Errol Spence for a potential matchup. Now, I want to preface this by saying, leading into this year and the early parts of this year, late last year, all the buzz was we're getting Crawford Spence. It's going to happen. They're talking about it. They were close to making it, apparently, and then it fell through because Crawford had some golden goose that was going to pay them $10 million each or whatever to do the fight. And Al Heyman didn't want to go public with his negotiations. So take all this with a grain of salt. I personally don't believe it's happening. But what do you read into these talks about Spence and Crawford?
You know, it's kind of like you said now. It seems like something falls through or something happens and, all of a sudden Crawford and Spence are talking again. Well, it's always talk. I mean, at this point, you know...
Nut up or shut up.
Yeah, I mean, it's too much now. Figure it out. You know, if you're going to fight each other, fight each other. If you're going to wait until you're 90 years old like Mayweather and Pacquiao did, then do that. Fine, whatever. Am I still going to pay for that fight? Probably. But, you know, figure it out because it's a fight that needs to happen. And now you're seeing some of these fights that are being made, a.k.a. Garcia Davis or even Loma Haney, which is...
Benavidez Plant,
which is going to be great fights. Well, Benavidez Plant already happened, but... You're seeing them happen now. They're, you know, Garcia and Haney, Garcia and Tank, two guys who I really didn't think it was going to happen. It happened. Go ask them how it happened and figure it out and make this fight, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not enough criticism can be thrown at Spence and Crawford. I see lots of criticism thrown at them, but sometimes actually, you know, I'm going to call out a little bit of boxing media because Chris Mannix, Mike Coppinger, Keith Idek, even my boy who it hurts to say this, Dan Raphael. These guys go after the sanctioning bodies, promoters, and all these guys a lot, and I appreciate that a ton. But Spence and Crawford are the only two obstacles not letting this fight happen. They are robbing boxing fans of the best event we could possibly have, and it is on the fighters at this point because I do believe that these promoters are willing to put up a bunch of money for this fight at this point. I think that Crawford's kind of overpricing himself. And I also think Spence doesn't want the fight either because Spence is preparing to go up to 154 and fight Keith Thurman up there. I don't think he wants to stick in this division and fight Crawford. And I mean, credit to Spence, he's fought a lot in the division, but he didn't fight the man. He didn't fight Crawford. And the same goes for Crawford. He ducked Spence. I don't want to say Crawford ducked Spence and Spence ducked Crawford, one or the other. They both ducked each other. That's what happened here. And I think they deserve more criticism, especially those two fighters, man. After we see, like you said, Garcia and Davis make things happen, I mean, even on the level where we see a battered, beaten down Teofimo Lopez, we don't know where his head's at. He seems willing to take on Josh Taylor. I mean, that's a big fight. And when was the last time Crawford was in a big fight? Not his last fight. It was his fight against Sean Porter, which was 2 fights ago. So I just think we need to see these guys move up. The word on the street I think will actually happen is Crawford will likely fight his mandatory in Rocha. He's holding out for a little bit more money. I think that's why he's kind of avoiding it right now. Rocha's a good kid. I love the fighter. He always comes with a lot of heart. But Crawford's just too skilled for him, man. And I think he's going to get outclassed, and that's unfortunate. I know you don't know a lot about Rocha. He's more of a not really a well-known name in the boxing scene. But what do you think? Does that fight excite you at all? Do you have any interest in seeing Crawford Rocha?
It sucks.
Maybe just because it's a Hispanic fight.
And it sucks because you want to get excited for some of these fights that Crawford and Spence could have coming.
Yeah, if it was Virgil Ortiz, I think none of us would have a problem with this.
But the problem is, you know, it's so those fights are so overlooked now because it's like, well, are they finally going to fight each other after that? I mean,
Right.
you got two guys here. Are you scared of your O? Because whoever loses,
He's
I'm
still
not
the
going to
guy,
have a
yeah.
problem with. I'm going to say, oh, Spence lost. Well, he lost to arguably, not me, but arguably the number one guy pound for pound. I mean, how is that? And then if you're...
Yeah, and if he loses at 147, I mean, he can jump up to 154.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're Crawford, well, you lost to what I've seen him anywhere from number 4 to number 7 pound for pound. Like, you lost to a top 10 pound for pound. That loss is by no means a tarnish on your career. Like, that's a fight that you went out there, you guys both took, one of you lost. Okay, so what? Like you said, Spence, you lose that fight, go become a champ at 154. Crawford, build a name back up, fight Virgil Ortiz. I think you win that fight. Like, do the fight now, because now it's the perfect time. Until one of you guys fall off of that pound for pound, then you do kind of got to be scared of that loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to piggyback on what you just said about those O's, I think the Mayweatherism of boxing really hurt boxing. And not just Mayweather, but also the Klitschko's reign, which they didn't go undefeated, but during their reign, they were undefeated. And they kind of just had a stranglehold on their divisions. And the Klitschko's less so, you didn't have the competition there, but Mayweather more so, when he was Pretty Boy Mayweather and he was picking up the early wins, I mean, he was fighting everybody, man. But later in his career, when he became Money Mayweather, he I wouldn't say he cherry-picked everyone, but he definitely waited till they were a little out of their prime to pick up his later wins. And I think that a lot of the younger guys kind of see that success and think, how can I make that astronomical amount of money that Mayweather's making? You know, Mayweather made more than any other boxer in history. And you don't always have to shoot for that. You know, you can live well off like a Canelo. Canelo lives great. I'm telling you that now. To these young guys coming up, you can live really well off and still take a loss. I mean, even look at guys like Gabe Rosado, who have taken quite a bit of losses, and they're still getting paydays, man. Don't if you take those big names, that enough on your resume, it will get you the paydays. So I hope that more boxers can kind of see that. Some more bad news before we jump into more positive stuff. Fury Usyk has also fallen through. Another chance to see two of the best in the division go one-on-one. The first chance we've had in over 30 years for an undisputed heavyweight champion. Seemingly falling through because of rematch clauses, which are insanely weird. They both had mandatories to do after the fight anyway. There would not have been a rematch, at least not right away. And Usyk seemed, I mean, just from what I've seen, from the public stuff we all kind of got to see, Usyk seemed ready and down to just throw, to go into Wembley and fight. It seemed like Fury maybe wanted a little bit of money. I wouldn't call Fury a duck because I think he actually beats Usyk, but Fury kind of pussed out for the money. I'd love to hear kind of what you thought of what's been made public, those little videos of greedy belly.
Yeah, I'm kind of on your side there. I don't see why. I guess I can't say that. Fury doesn't take the fight, and that's kind of what I see from it. Of course, we're not there. We're not flies in the room. We're not hearing what's going on. I wish we were. It'd be fantastic, but we're not.
We'd tell you on the podcast.
But Fury, I mean, sure, maybe you weren't getting the money you wanted necessarily, but you have all these sanctioning bodies who stepped aside, and they said, "Look, sure, we'll wait. You guys fight each other, and then you're gonna have mandatories after that. That's how it works."
You could drop the belts after.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they're doing that for you, make the fight. Just like Crawford and Spence, make the fight. Please make the fight. They didn't. The rematch clause to me is always a weird one. I don't necessarily like rematch clauses, but they're there. But yeah, I mean, respects to Usyk. If Usyk was what he was saying publicly was real, seemed like he was ready to fight and he was ready to go to Wembley and fight. And respects to Usyk. You know, hopefully that fight hasn't fallen through completely, but I mean, we don't know. We don't know because now these sanctioning bodies say, okay, well, you didn't want to make the fight, fine, then we have mandatories for you, and that's
right.
That's how it's gonna work.
And that seems to be where it's going. One thing I will say on that is another shout out to my boy Dan, who also hates the rematch clause, recently tweeting "fuck rematch clauses," which is pretty cool to see. And it sounds like we are heading into those mandatory fights. Fury may be heading towards a potential matchup with Joe Joyce to make a lot of money in London, which is a great fight, honestly, especially for those British fans. Just not an Usyk fight or even a Joshua fight. And then my prediction would be after whatever Fury does next, he's going to try and get Ngannou in the ring, I think, just for that payday, which is unfortunate. I wish it would have been Usyk and then he could go fuck around with Ngannou. But honestly, Fury, do that, please. My plea to you, Fury, as my favorite heavyweight in the world, The guy who got me into heavyweight boxing, Tyson Fury. I remember watching him sing when he beat Klitschko, man, and I was sitting down there with Dad, and it was the funniest thing, and I love the guy straight out of that. Fury, please fight Usyk, man. You'll beat him. I know you beat him. You're my guy, Fury. Let's do it. But yeah, it sounds like he's going to Joe Joyce, which you've heard that name before, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What do you think of a potential matchup between Joe Joyce and Fury?
Again, I think it's huge for British boxing too, or for the British fans, sorry. Because it's going to,
It's going to sell out Wembley.
Fury alone sells out Wembley. So Fury could go shadow box at Wembley. He might sell it out. But again, it sucks. It sucks because you think you're going to get this fight for a certain amount of time. Doesn't happen. It'll be a great fight. I'm excited to watch Fury win and hopefully sing again. I do think he wins that fight. Right now, I just don't see anyone beating Fury at heavyweight. That's kind of how it is. But it sucks, but it's an exciting fight. I'll always sit down and watch Fury fight, like you said, for the singing afterwards. It's incredible.
Yeah, Fury's always a showman, and I love his story, overcoming addiction, overcoming mental health, coming back and winning the title. Even after that, against 3 banger matches. Match of the Year candidates against Deontay Wilder, every single one of them.
Look at Fury's body, and then look at Wilder's body, and tell me who's going to win that fight.
Remember when Fury wore the Batman costume? I love Tyson Fury, man. I hope this doesn't blemish his career forever. I hope he comes to his senses and takes his fight. Because like I said, I think he beats Usyk. I don't know what your opinion is on that fight. I think Usyk has a good showing early on, but I think Fury just kind of overwhelms him with his awkward style.
Yep.
And then on the Usyk side of things, what appears to be next for him would be his mandatory challenger, which would be Daniel Dubois. Not a very exciting matchup at all, honestly. Kind of just a gimme fight because I think Usyk mops the floor with Dubois. After that, it would be cool to see Usyk step up to a Wilder or Ruiz. In my opinion, Wilder is the second best heavyweight in the world. I think he beats Usyk. I think he beats Ruiz. I think he beats Joshua. Fury's really the only guy that I think has Wilder's number. But what do you think on not only the Usyk-Dubois fight, but a potential matchup against maybe a Ruiz or a Wilder?
Like you said, Usyk is going to outclass. I think, in my opinion, I'd put Usyk number 3 heavyweight. Right there behind, just like you said, Fury and Wilder. And honestly, if Fury and Wilder fight again, who's to say that Wilder doesn't finally finish the job? I mean, he's knocked him down. Yeah, he's knocked him down enough to do it. So for that would be awesome. Usyk Wilder, I'd be a little bit torn. I like both of them a lot.
I love Usyk too. Yeah, there's no knock on Usyk for saying Wilder's number 2.
But yeah, no, not at all. But it's a great fight. It's another fight that sells out big arenas, probably a football stadium, here in the U.S. because Wilder has that following here in the U.S.
Right. And sorry, just to jump in,
you're good.
Pound for pound, Usyk's better than Wilder and Fury because we got to remember that this is a cruiserweight fighting at the heavyweight division and beating heavyweights. Not only beating heavyweights, beating Anthony Joshua, who was one of the top 3 heavyweights in the division. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
But again, it's Fury Usyk's the fight to make, and then if you can't make that one, you're right on with it. Usyk Wilder is the next fight to make, and then it would be fun. And I think Wilder would love that opportunity. I think Wilder would jump on that really fast.
Yeah, what's unfortunate is I think the heavyweights have a great chance to replicate the 4 kings of the old days. We have Leonard, Duran, Hagler, and Hearns. Now I think you could have really great matches. We've already seen Usyk Joshua. We've seen Fury Wilder. What's to stop Fury Joshua, Usyk Wilder, Usyk Fury to get it on? I think there's a lot of money to be made in the heavyweight division. I think a lot of these guys are ducking each other. Luckily, I think we're at the point where Joshua, he's got his losses and he's kind of just on his legacy run. And I think Wilder's at the same spot. So I think both those guys are ready to fight with anyone. We just got to get Fury in on it, and I think we could have a really good series.
Fury Joshua would just be insane over there.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest fight in British history. But moving on, we do have a confirmed heavyweight fight between one of those guys, and that's Anthony Joshua returning to the ring this weekend while we'll be watching WrestleMania with Logan Paul. Anthony Joshua is going to be taking on Jermaine Franklin, who I want to bring in. Well, first of all, have you ever heard of Jermaine Franklin? You've heard the name, maybe.
I've heard the name. I can't say I've watched him fight.
Okay, so just to give kind of some of the more casual people and chats a little bit of a rundown on Jermaine Franklin, he's not a joke fighter, man. In fact, I could see Jermaine Franklin just slipping by winning 7 rounds of this Joshua fight if we see a more tame Joshua. However, even if Franklin wins 7 rounds, I think Joshua gets the decision in London. So don't count on that. I think Jermaine Franklin would have to get a knockdown and win at least 8 rounds to get the decision. But I think if we see a Joshua who's kind of more ready for war, a Joshua who's ready to let his hands throw, and the main thing I'm concerned with is Joshua's chin. We saw him rocked against Pulev. We saw him rocked against Usyk, who are much smaller, lesser-known guys. We saw him dropped by Klitschko and outright stopped by Ruiz. So that's concerning to see. I think this fight will tell us where Joshua is at. I think it's not impossible to get the stoppage on Franklin. If Joshua gets the stoppage on Franklin, I think he's right up there with those heavyweights again. If he has to kind of cruise to a decision, I think you might have to start to be concerned with Joshua's chin. Especially, we just talked about a potential matchup with not only Fury, but Wilder. And if you're having questions about your chin, the last man you want to be across from that ring with is the bronze bomber, Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, I mean, the good news for Joshua is you saw touches of hope in the Usyk fight. In the Usyk fight. So that's good. I like Joshua.
I saw a little bit of that dog in him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A weird kind of, post-fight interview in the ring.
Oh,
but,
absolutely.
I like Joshua still. I hope he wins this fight. I think he will, but I'm saying
Joshua's
that.
such a class act.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He is. And I'm saying that not knowing this Franklin guy very well, but I think he wins. And if he wins, like you said, we'll see how he wins. And if he wins stoppage or even if he goes, wins 12 rounds of this fight, I think would look good. If he doesn't get hurt or rocked, and it'll look good. And then you start talking about Wilder, but like you said, man, Wilder just finds a way to land that punch. And if he lands that punch on Joshua, Joshua's not getting up. We almost saw Fury wasn't able to get up. But
yeah.
he did, but he almost wasn't able to. Joshua would not.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think this fight will kind of be the tipping point. And one last thing I want to say about Joshua is even with this Jermaine Franklin, because people are giving him shit that it's not Wilder or Usyk or Fury. What I'll say, or Joe Joyce, what I'll say is Joshua in his career has not taken an easy fight in his professional career. He always steps up to maybe not the top level guy, but at least the guy you want to see him in there with. Even with this case in Jermaine Franklin, I think it's going to be a cool fight to watch. Mad respect to Joshua. In my opinion, the best resume in the heavyweight division. And I hope he does get a confidence-boosting win over Jermaine Franklin, because I would hate for this to be the end of Joshua. I'd love to see him get back in with Fury and Wilder, kind of have that last swan song, make a lot of money, and then he can retire off into the sunset if he wants. But I think he deserves those big paydays. Even if he doesn't win those, or people mock him or whatever you want to say, Joshua deserves a last payday from us boxing fans. He's given us great fights, and as a heavyweight, you got to respect that man. So moving on to our final topic of the day. I know you weren't able to catch most of it, but today was the Lomachenko Devin Haney fight. Or not fight, but the press conference for the upcoming fight, the chess match as ESPN calls it. Not much trash talking. I mean, I was impressed to see how much respect both teams had for each other. Loma gave a lot of respect for Haney for becoming undisputed. Haney gave a lot of respect for Loma's accomplishments, but then they started to kind of trash talk him, saying that they ducked him back in 2019, which I don't think is the case at all. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on just the build-up to this fight. If you think there was a point where Loma was ducking Haney, if you think one team kind of deserves a little more recognition than the other, or what's kind of going through your head before we get into some picks.
No, I can criticize Loma from time to time, as you know, talking to me off podcast or off YouTube or whatever. But it's insane to me that you say Loma ducked someone. I don't think Loma ducked anyone. I think this Loma taking another chance to be undisputed took way too long. It should have happened immediately following the Teo loss, where Teo just, Teo
ducked Loma.
Yeah, Teo ducked and dropped the ball. I mean, just dropped it. And then, Kambosos, whatever, Haney kind of deserved it by that point, but Loma was always there.
Yeah, and let's remember, sorry to cut you off, but leading into that Kambosos-Haney fight, the Loma fight with Kambosos for undisputed was signed. Loma was going to step up and fight the man, but obviously everything in the Ukraine happened. He had to step away and deal with that.
Yep, and respects to that. That's bigger than any fight he could make. But back onto the boxing side of it is Loma didn't duck anyone. Loma should have had this opportunity a while ago. It's a shame that he's now a little bit older from when he fought Teo, because if he doesn't, I think he took some rounds off against Teo. He was hurt, sure. It sucks because, at the time I was going for Teo, but I think Loma would have been a funner champ to follow than Teo is.
I think you would have jumped on to these guys
absolutely.
Right away.
But now you got it. And Loma, you're getting old and you're getting up there, and maybe you're still dealing with some lingering injuries or issues, but this is your chance. Go out there and do what you do best and box this guy, fight this guy, and see what happens.
Okay, I want to hear your pick before I get into my prediction here.
I think it's gonna be an interesting fight. I like the chess match kind of slang that it has.
That doesn't make you nervous as more of a guy. I mean, you are a little more casual, but you're more hardcore than I would say a regular casual fan, so you can respect the boxing and all that. But we're definitely not getting a knockout this fight.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's going to be a little bit slower to the type of fan that is casual. And I call myself a casual, but I don't mind that. I don't mind seeing that, especially as I'm getting more into boxing. And seeing that as a hardcore boxing fan, I kind of refer to it as like baseball now. People want to see runs scored. Mm-hmm. I like seeing a pitcher's match where these two pitchers are just dealing all game. It's slow.
Right.
But it's fun. If you know what you're watching, it's fun. And this fight's going to be fun. It's two guys who I think Haney, I don't know if he has already, but will open up as favorite if he hasn't already. I'm assuming he has. I don't follow the bookies very well. But, if Loma's a big underdog, go throw some money on him, man, because it's going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be a close one. It's going to be a hard one to judge maybe. And when it's hard ones to judge, we know that sometimes those judges don't show up very, very well.
That's a fact, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting, and I'm excited for it. But I'm going to give my pick here. I do see Haney pulling out the decision.
Gotcha, and I can respect that. I'm going to go off on my little tirade now. This is kind of my moment. Chats understands. For those of you who don't know, super biased for Lomachenko, and I'll never apologize for this. Lomachenko is the man who got me into boxing. Besides my dad, who obviously showed me what boxing is, Lomachenko was kind of the superstar that caught my eye. I wasn't the kind of guy who came in for knockouts. Because Lomachenko's style was so impressive, but also you got the run of Lomachenko, which was, oh my God. I mean, we want to talk earlier today. I talked about Joshua and Canelo's resume, and Loma gets a lot of criticism for his resume, but every opponent Loma fought was ranked the number one guy when he fought him. Like Rigondeaux, Gary Russell Jr., Linares, even Luke Campbell was coming up in the rankings when he fought him. And Loma made these guys look embarrassing. They made him look like not even boxers. Even Linares dropping him was the only success Linares had in the fight. So I think Loma deserves a lot more credit than people give him. Ring Magazine seems to be the only people to give him credit. Somehow he's still number 7 in their pound-for-pound ratings. I don't even my bias ass doesn't have him that high. But I think Loma has I think y'all must have forgot, honestly, about Loma. So Haney has pillow hands, is what I'll say. So Haney's ability to pressure Loma isn't gonna be like Teo, where he's swarming him and overwhelming him with power and size and all that. I mean, Haney's bigger than him, sure, but Haney's got pillow hands for the division. And I'm just messing with Haney. I am actually a huge Haney fan. You can attest when he fought Jojo Diaz, our own homeboy, I was cheering for Haney louder than anyone.
You almost got us beat up by deciding to run your mouth to Diaz.
Yeah. So no knock on Haney. I'm just such a big Loma fan. And also, Haney's thrown out some questionable tweets. We won't get into that. But Lomachenko, I honestly think that this is his last chance, and he's going to come out knowing that. So I think we see a more angry, desperate Lomachenko willing to put his body on the line for this. And because of that, I think he might be able to just pick up enough wins to get that decision. Maybe even it takes a judge a little swaying. These judges are a little unpredictable, but I honestly think that we have a strong chance at seeing Loma come out with a split decision win here. So I agree with Angelo. If Loma opens up with some crazy odds in Haney's favor, I'm going to throw some money on Lomachenko. Because I'll just end it here. You almost have forgot about the Matrix, Lomachenko. This guy is everything. He's so good that when he loses to guys like Salido or Teofimo Lopez, they immediately run away from boxing. That's how good Lomachenko is, because they don't want to rematch him.
Taylor's about to fight Taylor.
Yeah, but that's kind of my tirade. I mean, I think it's going to be a close match, honestly. I think this is probably going to be the closest match we see maybe all year. just because there's not going to be a stoppage. I don't think Lomachenko stops Devin Haney, and I don't think Devin Haney stops Lomachenko. If Linares couldn't stop either of them, neither of these guys have that power. So I think we're in for a long night, a close night, but I got to give the edge a little to Loma. I think Loma's walking away with the W, and we'll get into it again more as it comes up. The fight's not till late May, so we'll have a lot of time to go over that. But that's basically going to do it for our podcast. Thanks a lot, Angelo, for coming on today. And
thank you.
And just being a part of the new podcast. We'll be here now together on every episode. Hopefully after a couple of episodes, we can start getting other guests in here too. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share it with anyone you can, especially your younger friends. You know, boxing is making a big comeback for Gen Z, and a lot of these guys don't really know who to be cheering for or who these guys really are. So we're hoping to kind of shine a light on a lot of big events coming up, even the smaller ones, once things kind of slow down. Luckily, we started in a really busy spot.
Yep.
But any last things you want to throw out there, Chats, before we go?
No, like you said, like, comment, subscribe, ask us some questions. Maybe, you got some questions, ask us.